Hi, everybody. It's Tyler and Douglas Gabriel with Michael McKibben today. Michael and Douglas have some exciting things to report. You know, we thought we knew history, but we didn't. Actually, we sat through public school indoctrination centers where they fed us untrue history. And today we're going to learn about the history that maybe you don't know about. So guys, take it away.
Welcome. Go for it, Douglas.
To the Doug and Mike show, or the Mike and Doug show. Mike, you have us watching a video today from Epic Times, which seemed to underscore the very content that you've been working on now for months and months and months, and digging up the history that we don't know about. And what was interesting is in that movie that you had us watch, that video, what's his name, Michael Rechtenwald, Dr. Michael Rechtenwald, who basically kind of got kicked out of university simply because he mentioned some truth. He points out that, in fact, that's exactly what the agenda is, and that the agenda with the mainstream media and education and academia is simply what we have uncovered and would call Wellington House war propaganda, based upon the ideas of the Pilgrims Society and on and on and on. So it's still going on today, and that's the amazing thing. When we look around at your research and look around at the world, it's one and the same. It's the same people, it's the same methods, it's Tavistock, it is brainwashing, it is the Mockingbird, MK Ultra, it's all true, and there's much more. This man was saying basically that he had been subject to that, and that many other professors have been subject to that, and that the left has taken over universities, media, all education. And the only thing I would disagree with him is that he just needs to simply say the following: we have devolved to the lowest common denominator with political correctness, and that is the changing agenda of the left.
Yeah. A number of people in the last week or so keep asking me, well, your patent was stolen in around 2000. Why do you keep talking about 1905 and 1902 and the late 1800s? And one of the analogies I give is that I'm a civil engineer, and one of the things engineers know, especially civil engineers who build buildings and bridges and large structures, is that if you've got a problem with your structure and you keep seeing cracks in the wall, it does you no good to cover it over. You've got to figure out why that crack occurred. And often it's something's happened in the foundation. And for example, they discover an underground water aquifer under a building. And so that water aquifer over time starts to erode the ground underneath the foundation, and therefore you'll see a crack occur in the building. Well, if you don't look for the aquifer and you just put a Band-Aid over the crack, it's going to crack again. And so that's really what we've been doing. We've been looking at, okay, here's where we came from. How far back does this go? And as you know, we have taken that very slowly from 2000, 2010, 2015, after our Supreme Court non-decision, and been working that back to find out who really is behind what we're experiencing in our society, in technology, and in the media. And that has led us to 1902, 1905, 1909, because there appears to have been a huge sea change in the way the people that were running the British Empire decided that they wanted to organize their dominance over world resources going forward. And what we see now with the mainstream media and this massive effort to censor anyone who disagrees with the radical leftist agenda, we see that we're seeing the end result of something that didn't start now. It started in the past. And so was it 10 years ago? Was it 20 years ago? Was it 50 years ago? We didn't know. But what we decided to do was just build on the facts that we discover whenever they were. And if that jigsaw puzzle came together, then maybe we would see something. And that's what's coming together very quickly now after 6 or 7 years of doing this investigation. And that's why we keep marching back to 1902, the first decade of the 20th century, because we see that the British Empire was reorganizing itself, and it decided to take down everyone else besides its monarchy, while they empowered companies in the U.S. and the U.K. In the English-speaking world to be the dominant authorities in the world, and they were intent on taking over governments to do it. And they decided in their great wisdom that they wanted a one-world government, and they thought that was a good way of doing it. And now we see, and the latest stuff that video is that they specifically were committed to socialism, democratic socialism, communism, Leninism, whatever term you want to use, on a way of organizing the masses that would allow them to maintain their elitist power while they limited and boxed in the masses so that we didn't consume too many resources that they obviously deserve. I don't know if you got that memo. I didn't get that memo. Did you get it?
No.
Oh, okay. I see.
So what you've also pointed out, the most fascinating part of it to me is that you discovered the incubation system of the British to create ideologies that basically have taken over countries. Marxism,
right.
Leninism, Bolshevism, communism, all of these.
Social democracy.
Social democracy. It was all birthed right there as a purpose of an opium for the masses as the
right.
elites were ripping them off. Can you tell us about some of that and some of the discoveries you've made, especially with Lenin and the times that he was in? Basically, he was being taught by the fascists of Britain to be an economic fascist.
Right. We discovered that members of the Pilgrim Society at the time, who were the founders of the Pilgrim Society in 1902, also organized this Imperial Press Conference in 1909, which is also when the British organized GCHQ, MI5, and MI6, and they staffed them with newspaper people. So we see this unholy alliance between media and intelligence. And as we know, what is an intelligence person's job? It's to lie. And so therefore we see and can easily extrapolate logically that it is also the newspaper man's job to lie, and has been ever since that period of time. But we found this particular person who a British researcher discovered hosted Lenin in 1905 during a conference in which Stalin, Trotsky, and Lenin attended. And as we look at more of these documents around that period of time, one thing that's becoming very obvious is that the propaganda that the British were pushing out was basically there to destabilize Germany and Russia, and that they were very skilled at what we call now false flags. And for example, we see this event that I've always read about in 1905 called Bloody Sunday in Russia. And it was supposedly led by this very disaffected priest, Orthodox priest, Father Gapon, or Gapon, I'm not sure how you say it, and which the story goes that he led a peaceful protest. He had deacons and people from the church holding up icons, and they had mothers and children there, and then the story goes, and I'm convinced it's propaganda now, that the Tsar's troops opened fire and just wiped all these people out in what they called Bloody Sunday. The more I read about this, the more I realize this is just another piece of totally fabricated propaganda, and probably this Father Gapon was just framed for this story. So what we've got to do is very clear. What we've got to do is go back and look at that whole period, because what it's becoming more and more evident is that all of these supposed conflicts that we have known before we were born, even before our parents were born, up to today, were all false flags in order to line the pockets of the Pilgrims Society, both in the UK and the US, and that those people have very cleverly taken control of the British monarchy through the Privy Council, and in the US have taken control of the US through the Senior Executive Service and other organizations within the country and outside the country, like the Atlantic Council, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Davis, what's the name of that Davis group? The World Economic Forum. Who else? Aspen Institute, Bohemian Grove. You've got all these feeder groups, but from everything that we are learning, it all rolls up to the Pilgrim Society, which is an English-speaking US, UK secret society, very openly. They call themselves a secret society, modeled after instructions that Cecil Rhodes gave them and provided lots of funds for them to develop. And so what we now see is that those oligarchs at the turn of the century, which were called robber barons, were a bunch of families that passed on their hegemony to their children and to their grandchildren, and now probably to their great-grandchildren. But it's the same group of people. It's not a large group of people, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000. But it's more than a few bankers, and that's always been the story, is that it was just a few bankers like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, and it certainly included them. They were all, by the way, Pilgrim Society members. But it's a larger group of people. And as we talked about in the last couple of interviews, we discovered this document, which is just a godsend to everyone who loves freedom on the planet, where we actually have a record of their meeting in 1909, where they recruited newspapermen from all over the planet to start British MI5, MI6, and GCHQ. And those became the directors that ended up developing the CIA, the FBI, and NSA, and I would add the State Department. So we have not been our own country for quite a while, it's turning out.
Wow. Professor Rechtenwald did not say what you just said. You just gave the backdrop and the frame for where we're at and why we're here. And it shows that ideologies, because this professor, he taught communism at a university. He has studied all these different ideologies. Here's what I think about ideologies. I don't think there are such things. I think there are people who make up philosophies, and whether they be economic, social, political, cultural, it doesn't really matter. And then they become despots. They become dictators. So it is Leninism. It's not Bolshevism. It is Stalinism. It's not communism. It's Benito Mussolini's fascism. It's Hitler's National Socialism. These people simply use it as an excuse. And what happens is the dichotomy between the elite and the poor. Right. And generally, it's simply, as Betsy always likes to say, a redistribution of wealth. And the problem is, these ideologies that were cooked up were a panacea for the masses.
Right.
And they were nonsense. They could never, ever work.
Right.
And even America, let's take America. We believe in capitalism. No, we don't. Capitalism would have free markets. We do not have free markets. The U.S. Federal Reserve makes sure of that. I can go down the list. Who are we in America? We are a collective corporate dictator that always gives the far left whatever they want. Otherwise, they become fascists and they become violent. And so
see here. Sorry.
Oh, you always give them what they want. So if you want to kill babies after they're born, oh, no problem. As long as you keep electing me, because I keep making sure that the globalists keep running things. And we are going to tell you whatever we want on mainstream media, and you are going to believe it. That is a fact. But we have methods that have been perfected since before that. Now, so let's take the imperialism of Cecil Rhodes. Or was it just Cecil Rhodes, a psychopathic, insane person? Yes. And then his follower, Alfred Milner, who literally went and, you can tell that story. I love the way you tell it because you're so connected to Russia. These things are so deep for you. When you say Soviet, to you, you know the oppression that those people went through because you were there and you witnessed it. I myself, I was a spy. I spied on Russia. That's what Russia, they told me Russia was my enemy.
Well,
and then when I found out they weren't our enemy, we were giving them all their technology so they could keep up with us so we would have an enemy. Complete nonsense.
So Douglas, I gotta know. Did you see me on a satellite? Did I wave?
Did I see Putin frisking you as you went into St. Petersburg, or was that Leningrad?
Leningrad.
So no, but we could see what every general was doing, and if a general picked his nose at the wrong time, it went into the report. And I'm barely exaggerating. Every single day, I can say this, they'll only put me in jail probably for a while. I read a report that was for the president's eyes only, that gave a report of what we gathered from Russia from just one aspect of signals intelligence. 27 pages, and each page was about as half as tall as me. So imagine.
Wow.
Every single day, back in the 70s, that's what we collected. Think what we collect now. So I also want to add one thing to Michael Rechtenwald's somewhat apocalyptic digital cyber warfare type of thing that's going on. It's worse than he says. I just want to emphasize that. We have done shows. We have shown how it works. We have shown the patterns. We have shown the subliminal programming. We've shown all of this stuff. It's way worse than anybody wants to admit. So when he was telling you, if you watch that video and you're listening to that, that is the tip of the iceberg. So Michael, tell us a little bit about when Alfred Milner went to Russia and the way that one single person was able to change the destiny of the world.
Yeah, the Parliament in early part of 1917 authorized the War Cabinet to provide funds to the Tsar to stop the Bolsheviks, and Milner was assigned to go to Russia and meet with the Tsar and his people and to provide that cash. Well, what he did was he went to Russia. And if you'll recall, back in 1909 now, we have the photo of their meeting with the Duma, the Russian parliament, and their president at the same time as the Imperial Press Conference was occurring in 1909. So it's pretty obvious. Milner had recruited his spies inside the Duma back in 1909, and he was exploiting that in 1917. That's pretty evident. And so he went there and he met in Leningrad with the Tsar's people and basically pulled the rug out from under him and said he wasn't going to provide the cash. So he defied Parliament's instruction. So who would have that much power? Clearly, this man was running the British Empire. I think it's really clear that he was running the show. And he had been the commissioner down in South Africa, had set up he set up concentration camps with General Lord Roberts, and he had killed something like 30,000 people, whites and blacks, in the Transvaal, and he was a ruthless character, and he was a Cecil Rhodes devotee and actually continued the Round Table, which then became the Pilgrim Society. So this is not a man that you want to meet in a dark alley.
So I wanted to say that you keep seeing the screen with Christopher Strunk. He's trying to join the conversation.
Oh.
And as soon as he pops on the screen, I'm going to try to get him connected by audio. So apologies,
Okay.
but I think he has a lot to say about this subject.
Christopher Earl Strunk. Now that live is going to be a treat. Now I just want to say, we're talking about Cecil Rhodes, we're talking about Alfred Milner. Let's just talk for a second about how powerful this dictator, basically an extension of the British East India Company, Cecil Rhodes, went down to South Africa, took the gold, took the diamonds, gave the gold to the Rothschilds, gave the diamonds to De Beers, is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
And
which was Rothschilds.
Which is also Rothschild at first, and then John always likes to point out that separate. They experimented on the people. They killed tens of thousands of people. It was the worst form of fascism, flying under the auspices of imperialism, as he called it. All these isms, forget the isms. We're talking about a man that was a Hitler. And then he had Alfred Milner come along and make it corporate and worldwide. And then the British East India Company filtered fully into the United Kingdom, and it still has continued to this day. This is nothing new. The Pilgrim Society, as I was looking at the list of current members, every evil person you can name in any conspiracy is a member of the Pilgrim Society in America and in Britain. That's just the way it is to this day. How can that be, folks? That's an ism. That's that Pilgrim Society, pilgrimism. And we should now say pilgrimism is a form of global fascism and realize that they are terrorists working against all nations, not just America, and their systematic old Venetian Giuseppe Mazzini type fascism that came into Britain, literally, physically, that is still going on in our banking system, and we are still, whether we know it or not, subject as vassals and economic slaves to this global fascism.
Yep. Well, I think what we've got to do is not put all of these developments in parallel, or we've got to realize that, as far as I can tell now, the Pilgrim Society is driving the bus worldwide. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones attacking President Trump and our republic, because they don't want a republic. They want a vassal. They want a vassal state in Britain, in the U.S., and they have these notions of white supremacy. And I know some people don't like talking about that, but they definitely, if you read Cecil Rhodes's writings, I mean, he talks about the white race, and they extrapolated that out to be the English-speaking peoples. In fact, in that 1909 document, they talk about the English-speaking race. So these guys were racists. And isn't it interesting that the left today just harps on the idea of racism and accuses their opponent of who they are? And I think we've got to realize that everything we hear in the media right now, the truth is the opposite of what's being said. And if we start listening with that in mind, it gets pretty easy to get educated.
Yes, Professor Rechtenwald said that. We have to be able to listen through the news of in the post-truth age, and also the falsehood politics age. And generally, it's 180 degrees opposite.
Right.
So if they tell you something, assume that that's completely a lie, it's completely made up, and it's a part of propaganda. Now, how can they get away with this? Because they found out, and this is the powerful part that we want to really underscore. The roots of the American what's it called? The American Alliance that provided the money from America, and then you found the very people who found the money from Britain, who supported Bolshevism, who supported communism, who supported chaos Marxism, who supported Marx. And you just mentioned, you had Trotsky, Lenin,
Right.
Stalin and later Marx and Engels all practically sitting in the same room, receiving the same British fascist training, so that then they went over, as you pointed out, when they started the Imperial Press Conference, they got their Russian spies set up so that Milner could go over there and pull off a fast one with the yellow journalism, because all of them swore an allegiance to reporting, first off being spies, and then reporting through this network directly to the head of Parliament. But of course, the head of Parliament was always a member of the Privy Council and a member of the Pilgrim Society and a member of this elite group. So I see it that as time went on, there were more people wanted to get involved in this, but they're using the exact methodology. You actually found a document that showed a number of points. Those are the same points George Soros uses for color revolutions. Those are the same literal methodology being used by the mainstream media with Avid and ISIS management, which is basically creating the news and putting it on the screen. No one is doing any investigative journalism anymore. And even when you see investigative journalists, you have to wonder, where did they get all that information? Where are their sources? And what is it they want us to believe? This is what we always do with perception management. What is it they want us to believe? The opposite is true.
Well, when you see these stories, these early false flags, the pattern's the same. They create an event, and immediately the Mockingbird Press, in this case in 1902, is one article I saw, all repeat the same story, and it's got way too much detail, juicy detail, the kinds of things you'd see in a tabloid. And they get into what the guy ate for dinner, and then where he went the following day in Germany, and then he disappears and he shows up in England. And how is it that a journalist can have all that level of detail over an event that just occurred the day before? That is a telltale sign that we see today. Like they've even got a picture of this Father Gapon being hanged. They've actually got a photo of it, allegedly, and it just doesn't smell right. And yet, why don't we ask more questions as a consuming public? I don't know.
Well, let's look at the common problem right now, the whistleblower. Now there's two whistleblowers. Who are the whistleblowers? Oh, we're going to change all the rules, all the laws. We're going to make sure the whistleblower name never comes forward. We're never going to actually see any evidence. We're going to believe secondhand information. What is that? That's propaganda, simple and plain propaganda. And what is it for? One purpose: to destroy Trump because he is against the globalists. All those groups you mentioned earlier before pulled their hair out, and then what was left they set on fire. The Bilderberger Group, the Trilateralists, every one of them met. The Bohemian Grove, I don't even believe they meet anymore, because as long as Trump is in power, there's nothing they can do. And they knew before that no one was at the controls of this supposed New World Order, this globalist order, this United Nations extension of nations. No, it's not true. There is no such thing, and there never will be until one thing happens. And I know I'm sometimes rather pessimistic, so I'm going to try to be positive here. I'm going to smile and say something optimistic. I believe that the good in humankind will win, because seeking the lowest level, the lowest common denominator, gets boring after a while.
Right.
AOC, the Green Deal, how long can any fascist leftist believe a single word of that can actually be applied in the real world that is not the imagination of a psychotic fool? Now, she's not just a psychotic fool, because her handler, Chakrabarty, who's now jumped ship because of all the election fraud, his handler was Cenk Uygur, who was the head of the Young Turks. Guess who created the Young Turks? Giuseppe Mazzini. To this very day, the Italian fascists are on YouTube and created a candidate. And how is that candidate created? They put out an ad, just like the whistleblower lawyer put out an ad and said he'd even give a discount for anybody who would whistleblow on Trump. And we now know that whistleblower worked for major Democrats and blah, blah, blah. Even the lawyer worked for and we know George Soros is behind. Oh, my. Same old, same old. But what is really going on with AOC? Same as always. They take someone who is the level of the lowest common denomination, which is ignorant, and they empower her. They literally put out ads. They had hundreds of people answer, and they chose the prettiest little girl they could. Why? Because Chakrabarti needed a new girlfriend. That was his girlfriend up until he broke up with her. But she was trained by Chink Uyghur. Why doesn't she admit that she's an ism? She's a fascism. She is Turkish fascism, which was based upon Italian fascism, based upon Mazzini and others, but particularly the Venetian bankers. This is the same old Machiavellian agenda that has been going on since money started to earn interest. When money could earn interest, that was the problem.
Would you define fascism? Because it gets thrown around so much. How do you define fascism?
I define fascism as illogical, unexplainable, aggressive behavior towards anyone that isn't you, a form of violent ethnocentrism that is usually based upon a period of chaos Marxism just beforehand, which is simply economic predatory tactics of the globalists. It's standard procedure everywhere. Call it what you want. I call radical Islamic terrorists fascists.
Yeah.
Because they're just simply fascists. It's been going on since, well, I could go back to the history of it, but it doesn't matter. The point is, what is hanging, what is the picture hanging in the Senate? It's not even a picture. It's a relief. In the Senate and the House, what's the one common thing? Fascia, a bundle of sticks with a hatchet coming out one end. If anyone can, I can tell you what that means in great detail, but if they can't tell you what it means, they're simply putting up the sign of a fascist, just like when Pelosi wore that little pin on her lapel, which was stating that she was a Caesar. Remember, when Pelosi got her job as the Speaker of the House, what did she say? She said, "I am just as powerful as the president." Those were her words. And basically, this is an overthrow. Remember now, they want to impeach Pence also so that Pelosi can go straight to the White House, and they wish to impeach the entire cabinet so she can bring a Democratic cabinet with her. That was the plan from the beginning, because even before she was confirmed as Speaker of the House, they changed the rules to make impeachment this complete kangaroo court that it is.
Right.
That's fascism.
Well, I think that one of the things I think people who listen to this information have a hard time believing is that this agenda could have gone on for so long without being detected. And I think what I've discovered in this information is we're not talking about tens of thousands of people. We're only talking about several thousand at any one time. And then we're looking at two layers of secrecy. We're looking at their inherent level of secrecy, which they've created for themselves, with the instruction from Cecil Rhodes to use Jesuit-like tactics, which I would like you to explain what that means, Jesuit secrecy. And then secondly, because these newspaper men took over modern intelligence, they assumed the protections, the secrecy, state secrets protections of each of our countries. And so when you add that layer on top of the Jesuit secret society layer, you've got a lot of protections. And then we have the additional third layer, which is, since all of this this conspiracy rolls up to the Privy Council, we discover that the Privy Council has its own Supreme Court, which trumps all the other Supreme Courts, or all the other courts in the UK and the Commonwealth, and there they hide behind the skirts of the Queen. So who appears to be a useful tool for them. So the real power is on Fleet Street with the Privy Council, the Inner Temple for the lawyers, with the media people, with the intelligence people, and with the banks. And it's all on Fleet Street. Isn't that convenient?
It certainly is. I think Betsy's going to be happy because you called the Queen a useful tool, which I will probably shorten to just saying the Queen's a tool. And that's the exact model. The Queen and the Privy Council is and all central banks, as they were founded, particularly the British Central Bank and the Vatican, and any other Rothschild-styled central banks. And people will argue with you that the Rothschilds don't own central banks. That is incorrect. They own a bunch of them, and then they own the stocks of a bunch more, and then the rest of them are based upon that style. And the style is fractional banking, that you loan out more money than you have to back up the money that people gave you. This is just simply a Ponzi scheme. Now,
No, before, did you see my Betsy Ross t-shirt?
Yeah.
Nice.
I know you boys have them, but you're not wearing them yet. Look, before you go further, a lot of questions out here on what is the relationship of senior executive service to the Pilgrims Society? I know there's a lot of connecting tissue there, but can you explain that to folks?
We don't have a one-to-one list currently of who the Pilgrims are. That's a list that's coming out soon. But it's easy to go back 10 or 15 years and see the correlation between SES and the Pilgrim Society. And I don't see a one-to-one, but I do see that the most senior executive service people are also Pilgrims. So they're at the top of that heap. They don't have to control it all. They just have to control the direction.
Plus, we know that the senior executive service has a union. So with one command, they all must obey. They are a paramilitary organization. That is the reason they're called generals, and that is the reason the head of the Jesuits is called the superior general, and because they are a paramilitary organization. Now, where do they get their ultimate command from? Well, strictly speaking, that would come probably from the Committee of 500 in the DOJ, but then that, as we have seen with the Russian dossier, gets dispersed throughout this, as we call it, this corporate group of globalists. So
Right.
The deal is, if you make decisions for the globalists, you're going to get a higher position in the senior executive service. You won't even be appointed in the SES unless you are an absolute globalist before you're appointed. Now, where do you take your orders from? You take it from the SES union.
Can you give him an opportunity, Chris, to speak up? Chris, can you hear us? There he goes again. All right, that's it. I can't do it anymore.
Oh, Chris.
Everybody. But when you see his screen come up, I need you to stop talking so he can see if it works. Okay, that's all.
Yeah, he only gets reception sometimes for a little bit. And, I talked with him about an hour and a half yesterday, and wow, did he ever fill me in on some amazing stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to
especially
hear
what's going on
take.
with Turkey and Syria and Lebanon and all these different things, as well as why the Fed is supposedly pumping all the billions of dollars into the other banks. Absolutely fascinating stuff. So, Chris, sorry you can't get in the conversation, but as you know, we talk so fast, it's hard to get a word in edgewise anyway. So, going on with this, Michael, this is not of the past. It is still going on to this very day. And so when we see a false flag like this whistleblower, they use the same tactics that they used, and then they've added to it because, Edward Bernays and the ability to change people's minds, as Dr. Robert Epstein just reported, 26 million votes were changed simply by the algorithms of Google, and then
Right.
People don't want to say that has an effect. I liked that this video that you had us look at with Dr. Michael. Oh, there you go. What he said, it woke us up. And the person who was the interviewer was really shocked to be awakened to what we told them a long time ago, which is very clear. Whether it's the Soviet Union, whether it's Marxism, whether it's fascism, whether it's Italian fascism, British fascism, it doesn't matter. They're going to put you in a box. So what did Google do? Well, they are the new corporate digital warlords who have to get their piece of the pie. And yes, they're directly connected to the government. He is a little bit slight on that point. Basically, that none of these groups could be there without the government, and they're supported to this very day.
Can I interject here? I think that what I liked about his presentation is that he had come to the same conclusion from a totally different angle, from a standpoint of a professor of English. And he had studied all of these philosophies going back through history, and he had come to that complete conclusion that something went on back at the turn of the last century that really is still affecting us today with socialism and with leftism and Bolshevism. He had found those. And so he, without having all this research that we have, he had concluded it with a totally different set of logic. That's what I found most fascinating about his presentation.
Yes. And so the senior executive service probably, well, like any Jesuit system, oh, we might get Chris here. Well, like any Jesuit system, there's one person in the middle. That's the general. And the rest are the soldiers who will give up their life for whatever it is the general orders them to do, period.
Right.
You don't get to ask a question. You simply do it. And if that means that as a Catholic, you have to become a Muslim and hide as a Muslim somewhere to infiltrate them, no problem. Here's the Jesuit method. Enter, infiltrate, take over the education, and then take over whatever communication systems they have, and then they give you the keys to the city. And so by the time that the Pope would say he would want to go to war with someone, he'd say, I'm going to send in 2 Jesuits. By the time the army got there, the Jesuits would come out with the keys to the city. Why? Because they had taken over the brainwashing of the elite and opened schools. Jesuits in America have over 20 universities. And what are they? They're brainwashing centers to make sure that no one is spiritual, that they're spiritual materialists. And once you're a materialist, then everything is right now. Okay. And everything is the 7 deadly sins. And I'm going to get my piece to the pie. And I'm going to lust and envy, and I'm going to have greed and avarice. And then I'm going to become a glutton. And then eventually I'm going to hate myself and everyone for me becoming a glutton. And that's what happens to these people.
Well, Douglas, you're blowing my mind because Jesuits.
John.
John Barnwell.
John's talking, but I don't see his camera.
That's okay. You can do without the camera. He wants to chime in.
I'm in the caves finding the gems. I guess my camera doesn't work down here.
Well, that's probably good for all of us. Sorry.
It's too dark.
John, what do you have to say about this topic?
Well, I mean, come on. We've been talking about this yesterday, for example, Douglas and I talked to Chris for 45 minutes, hour and a half? I don't even know. It's such a fast-moving conversation that before you know it, it's like all this time has gone by, like you go into this time warp. And I think that what's important is we emphasize the things that lead to something. Like, for example, the Miller notice that Michael has pending. And I call it pending because I believe that that's what has to happen. As far as making people aware of the senior executive service. Now, I sent Douglas a video the other day, some other guy who was talking about the senior executive service and the Pilgrims Society. I'd never heard of him before. He didn't mention any of us. And so I think if we just keep working on this, it's going to bubble to the surface. And it's like the Dalai Lama once said to Douglas and I, if there's a lake, the swans will come. And so we're just here in our little pond, trying to put this out here. It's like a message in a bottle. But the key right now is the election and the voting machines that are controlled through the Optech software. And that whole push for paper ballots is absolutely crucial for the survival of the planet or even the species. I mean, these people are so far gone, I can't even begin to guesstimate what's going on beneath the hood of the minds of these people. I mean, because they're demonically possessed as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's really sad. And what what Rechtenwald, the professor, said was you have to have islands of culture, islands of truth, and that we have to basically undo the post-truth age and reinstill a new age of truth. And so we are these little islands. We are this archipelago. We are, for instance, Americans for Innovation. Americans aim for truth, the American intelligence media, and then what you're doing with Leo Zagami and his show, and then your own show that you're starting. What we find is we are in a war, and we said this from day one, and I said it and people didn't believe me. I said we're in a war, and this is more serious because what do we fight over in wars? Land. The cyber world is land. It has resources, and you are the resources they're mining, and that's the reason that they're trying to take you over through all of this stuff. So this is a war, and we said from the beginning, people will drop to the left and right of us, but we shall continue. And if the flag is dropped, the Betsy Ross flag in this case, we shall pick it up and we shall surge forward and look at the hundreds and thousands of conservative voices, the truth islands that have been silenced. And this is a matter of squelching free speech. He never said it in his video, but this is a program of squelching free speech like we've never seen in human history before. And it's in the cyber realm, because it's in that realm that your soul, your heart, your spirit is being fought over as the new land where the war is actually taking place. Your bloodstream, as we have said many a time, is where the battle is really going on. So, John, we thank you for being one of those truth islands and for being one of the original romantic futurists, as well as Conclave member, as well as all that you do.
Monastic Club.
And the Monastic Club. And so we've been doing this now for decades and decades, but we got to thank the people who literally put their self on the line. Michael McKibben, you put yourself, all your money, all your everything, you put it all at stake. And right now you are fighting this battle for truth, and we want to salute you too. And Betsy, I know you're listening. Tyler, you are one of the great truth warriors. And Sophia doesn't take wimps in her battlements. She insists that every single truth warrior, everyone who's seeking wisdom, needs to be the person who will surge forward, pick up that banner, and lead the battle, not just follow or sit back and watch.
That brings up an interesting historical point, if I might expand the window a little bit. Bernard of Clairvaux was the sponsor of the Knights Templar. At the founding of the Knights Templar, he's the one who gained them recognition. Of course, their strategy was to establish a non-papal leadership council in Jerusalem. But it's important to remember that it was Bernard of Clairvaux that brought the emphasis of the Mother Mary. And so that the whole birth of the feminine within the Christian Catholic impulse at that time was through Bernard of Clairvaux. His lectures on this, the importance of Mary as a handmaiden of the Lord, so to speak, and that she was there to help bring to her son, who's the incarnation of the highest that has ever entered this planet. And so there is this whole bridge that leads back, and we're not alone. And I think it's so interesting because I've been meeting people from all over the country and the world as a result of this adventure we've gotten into here. You know, like just recently I met a gentleman from Wales, you know, and he's going to get copies of my books, and we're all trying to get these messages in the bottles and get them out there, because basically the internet was created by CERN. It was a DARPA program, and it was originally used to be able to handle the calculating strength that was needed for the research that's going on at CERN, as you know. And the first internet was just a 2-point junction. And it was essentially thought from there to be a good tool to weaponize, and then they decided to go public, and here we are.
Well, John, I just want to underscore what you said. Who stands on the top of the Capitol building? Ask any American. 9 out of 10 won't have any clue. And then when you tell them, they won't know who that being is. The being of Columbia, the District of Columbia. There's probably not, 100 people in America that can tell you, unless they're politicians,
Well,
Who's the being of Columbia? I know you can, and I just want to say that's the reason you're not off topic, because the being of wisdom, the being of truth, is represented by the being of Columbia. And also going back to your second point, and that's that Professor Rechtenwald, he said that, oh yes, they're taking down all your information, they're surveilling you. No, today we just heard that they have admitted that they identify you by your voice, by your retina, by your biosignatures from your finger, and this is all going to be part of the internet now. And if you do not add up, you won't get on the internet, and then you will be denied ability to get to your bank account. Everything's going digital, everything's centralized so that they can control you. It's as simple as that. So the District of Columbia should not be the District of Columbia. It should be the District of Fascists, because they're taking away your freedom.
Those, I don't think they've dealt with we the people yet, because we're going to preserve our privacy. And to comment on John's comment about Bernard of Clairvaux, I think one of the things that I never realized is that there were kind of two strains of thought related to the Virgin Mary. One, there was the Western Latin Church, where I think that what John's saying is accurate. And then there was the Eastern Church that never really lost a sense of who Mary was. And that she's called the Theotokos, or the God-bearer, in Orthodox theology. And so I think that's one of the beauties of the Orthodox Church. They never really lost the understanding that the most holy person on this planet is the God-bearer, the Virgin Mary. And so we have all of these spiritual truths to draw on now. And the beauty of what I think Betsy calls truth seeds is our job is to plant the seed. Take these items of truth, plant them wherever we can, and then not worry about it, because God's going to give the increase, just like a seed in the ground. And we may not know how it bears fruit, and not all of it will. But our job is to get up every morning and plant, and do what we can, our stewardship, to water and till the soil and things like this. But not worry about tomorrow, because if we've done our job every day, then we can put our heads down at night and say, okay, tomorrow's a new day, without being depressed, which is what we don't want people to do.
Well, that's, continuing on my little historical thread here. So we move forward to Dante, and in the Divine Comedy, where he goes through the 9 levels of hell and the 9 levels of heaven and purgatory, and he gets the whole grand tour by the woman Beatrice, or Beatrice, right? But when he gets to the highest level of heaven, the rose of heaven, who's there as his guide? It's Bernard of Clairvaux, once again. So you see that there's this thread, and it very much is connected to the Theotokos, is what you're talking about. To become a theodidact, to be able to experience the outpouring of the wisdom of the Godhead, has to do with being able to develop the wisdom relationship to the means, as they would call it in Tibetan Buddhism. There's always this two-handed relationship between wisdom and means. And it's something that's been very locked out in many of the approaches to trying to understand the mystery of Christ. And I think it's very interesting at this time that it's come forward. And you get the rabbis in the tradition of the Kabbalah, and they say that the Messianic period was going to begin when people became thirsty for the Kabbalah, for the tradition, for that, the work of the chariot, as they would call it. That's where you build the wisdom vehicle to be able to comprehend things that are of God, see? And that was something that arose at the third destruction of the temple in 70 AD. And it's that whole stream of that, the Logos stream, right? And if you get into the Kabbalah and you start to understand that it's basically a different version of what was given out in the school of Dionysius the Areopagite, the disciple of Paul in Athens, who was the leader on the Hill of Mars, and they created that school, and that's the esoteric Christian stream that talks about the 9 orders of the angelic hierarchy. And so this is something that's deeply spiritual that's being undermined through technology.
John, Professor Rechtenwald brought up Dante and said that it's not allowed anymore because in one of the realms of hell, Moses is seen there, Muhammad is seen there being punished. And so this goes back to what we started with. This is the lowest common denominator. If in fact any belief can then cause everyone else in the whole world to have to subsume that belief, co-opt that belief, or as I would say, sink to the lowest common denominator, because there are certain beliefs in this world, and I won't go into them, but they don't believe in women, and they don't mind killing people. And for instance, Ilhan Omar, recently, she got accused of being cheating in her marriage and is divorced. So if she goes back to her country, they can stone her to death. Now, is that really what we want? That's why the District of Columbia was created, so that freedom could happen. And what does Columbia do? She gives out a hat, usually, the hat of initiation. That initiation represents freedom. And she holds a torch, not a sword. That torch is the torch that leads into the caves of initiation to bring wisdom and light into darkness. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. But what do we end up doing? We end up sinking to the lowest common denominator and using war as actually the tool between the very things that are not connected. For instance, religions. So we can literally sit back and say, well, all right then, Iran is the source of radical Islamic terrorism. Therefore, we can go to war with them. Yes, that is the way that it works. Ideologies, which generally, for instance, Roman Catholicism. Talk to any 2 Catholics. No 2 believe the same thing. They pick and choose, and that's what they believe. And that's basically true everywhere, in my opinion. I don't believe that there is any pure communism. There's no pure fascism. There's no pure socialism, no pure democracy. And by the way, we always claim we're a democracy, but we're not. We are a republic, a democratic republic. But, we say we're a democracy. Here's what democracy is. Democracy is chaos Marxism in its truest form, because you stand in a group. People speak from both sides, and then you are allowed to yell which side you believe in. And whoever has the loudest noise, that's who wins the day. That's democracy, folks, and that's the kind of democracy going on here in America. It's called the radical left, and the louder you scream, and the more you cry, and the more you say it's not politically correct, and the more you say you're offended, then the more you get to control the laws of America, literally. The laws of America are being subsumed by the laws of those people coming to America who don't believe in our laws. This is where we're at. We are dipping down into not the lowest dregs of humanity. We're dipping down into animalism. And now you can see that. People literally change their bodies to look like animals. They marry animals. They live for animals and robots. And remember, robots are kind of like animals. And so now what do we want to do? We want to worship the robot that's coming, that's going to be our God, called the super artificial intelligence. This is what the professor was warning us about. Mm-hmm. It's coming, folks. And as John said, we've warned you about this. It's more than Dragonfly. It's more than the social credit system of China. It's already been instituted here in America. We've warned you about it. What you have to do is wake up, take control of your own life, and do what we're saying here. And what the professor said is, get control of discerning truth. Get your own wisdom and find the sources of truth so that when you see the evil, it doesn't bother you anymore because you're not turned neurotic or psychotic because of it. You simply see it for what it is. And just like Michael has found us, the roots of fake news, the roots of war propaganda, the roots of the corporatocracy, the roots of the corporate dynasties, we can cut those things out at the root because we now know where the root is.
Right. Yeah, that's the key. We've got the facts now, and those facts are pesky things. And with those facts, we can now march forward and look at what's going on today and understand how they got there. And I mean, you're right. We talk about. It just drives me nuts to hear all these people talk. We're a democracy. We're not a democracy. The founders specifically did not choose a democracy because what they observed in history is that democracies became tyrannies of the majority. And so what they said was, we want a republic where the rights of the majority rule without infringing the rights of the minorities. I mean, that's a beautiful dynamic. And that can be applied by simply applying the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We don't need these fancy philosophy. And what we're seeing is the late 1800s and early 1900s is when most of these isms gained a foothold, and the British at some point in that 50 years between 1850 and 1910, 1920, really perfected how to hijack these different philosophies and use them to their advantage to control the masses. And the scary thing is that part of their philosophy is eugenics, and as is such an antithetical idea that I believe in lowering the population. Well, what does that mean? And okay, we've got issues of responsibility, we've got issues of stewardship, but taking somebody who's made in the image and likeness of God and snuffing out their life because I've got this theoryism that you shouldn't be here is the definition of demonic. And that's what these people are pushing on all of us now, and have been for 100 years, and they've been somewhat successful. I mean, you talk about 200 million people have been killed since they started down this ism route, and they're still in charge. So they've done a pretty effective job at getting where they wanted to be. But what, as you've said, Douglas, many times, we are now taking this technology which they wanted to use for further control, and they let it get out in the wild, and that's the platform we're on right now. And we've got to get control of our lives before they completely snuff out our control of our communications, which they started working on as soon as they learned about cable and then wireless and now internet. So they've been at this for a long time, and they haven't really changed their stripes at all.
I mean, you can look at it, it's kind of metaphorically, like, it's the carbon devices against the, or the carbon units versus the silicon-based computer devices. And it's very, I'm sure they didn't plan that, but it's like, you don't have to plan things, because when you pursue these pathways, these nefarious pathways, you don't realize how you're being led by the nose. And that's essentially the message that is available. If you look at the movie regarding the apocalypse that was done by that Swedish filmmaker, where he has the knight playing chess against the devil, right? And it's this whole step by step. The whole reason all this is going on is for our benefit. We have to realize that, and we have to be able to find humor in life. Rudolf Steiner once said that the best thing you could do to the devil is laugh at him. It's because he would wilt in the face of it. And so I think a lot of people can get too hung up in the trappings of this whole nefarious development when you realize it's like in The Wizard of Oz, they look behind a curtain and there's this little feeble old man pulling the levers. These people are not that great. They just have a lot of money and they're tied into the network of the resources. They could be set aside very, very easily.
Yeah, Professor Rechtenwald said some really good things. And one of the things he said is that they're going to try to use machine intelligence to adjust human intelligence. Now, that's what we've been saying a lot of. And here's the deal. That's true. Now, what I liked was he said, don't worry, humans aren't going to put up with that. We like our freedoms. They can do that to us, and the more they do it, the more we're going to resist. Look at Hong Kong. Look at, well, we can go into many examples, but the point is we are going to resist once we know that it's happening. But if we don't know it's happening, for instance, when you're writing somebody a response in your email and it fills in the rest of the sentence for you, and then you say, oh, well, that's not what I was going to say, but I'm going to go ahead and go with that. That's what's going to happen, folks. Your thinking, as he said, will simply be augmented by the machine. And if you have wrong thinking, you won't be able to participate. Not only will they lock you out, you just can't participate. So you will either have the party line, which will be the lowest common denominator, fascism of the worst sort, or you simply will have no freedom. And this is what we're warning about. But it is, as I said before, about love. And so if you can bring warmth and you can bring wisdom and you can bring truth into these devices that want to adjust you into machine thinking, then you're bringing human thinking, warmed up human thinking, spiritual thinking, soul thinking into a device that doesn't like that at all. And it really can't deal with that. So we're going to continue to do our work. And just like the gentleman said, little islands of truth, that's what is going to be the salvation of the situation.
Yeah, people in management have known for a long time, especially compensation, that most people perform to the way they're measured. And if you have poor measurements, then their conduct is going to be all over the map. And so accountants learned this a long time ago. And there was a conference that I spoke at, the conference board in New York in the 90s. And I heard an accountant say, we're not going to need any kind of corporate guidance in the future because everybody's going to be measured and is going to adjust their conduct in order to get the pay. And I thought that made a lot of sense. And there were systems called the balanced scorecard and scorecards and leaderboards and digital scorecards, various ways of getting at a management information system that would report to you these measures. And to a certain degree, that's useful because it helps people get more productive. But at the point it steps over the line, and I think that's what's happening now, into essentially putting you in a box and prodding you with a little cattle prod to get you to do what somebody else wants you to do at all times, takes away the person's free will. And I think that's the big stepping off point, is free will that is advocated by many religions, certainly advocated by Christ, is what these guys are trying to get rid of. And I think that's why they're attacking so many religions right now, is those religions are standing in the way. And in America, obviously, that's Christianity. And so they're actively attacking Christianity right now. It's quite obvious. And I think it's now time that we step up and we say we're not going to put up with this anymore.
Well, we see it in America that socialism has taken over. So the Democrat Party, the Demon Rat Party, is now the party of socialism, leaning towards fascism, chaos Marxism. And as we know, Hillary Clinton is a communist. That's not a rumor. She is a communist through and through, Russian and Chinese. She basically is the definition of an ism and a psychopath who takes that ism and then wants to control the world through hegemony, total world control. So we get to see that recently she said, we need to throw out the Constitution.
She did?
It doesn't work anymore. Yeah. She said, we don't need it anymore. It doesn't work.
Well, I mean, come on, George Bush Sr., he said, oh, it's just a piece of paper. But just today, President Trump is signing an executive order regarding bureaucratic transparency. I mean, that's a major step. And if you got to hear him speak about it, it sounds as if he's specifically addressing the senior executive service, and he talked
beautiful.
He talked about the way in which they were acting as a fourth branch of government, which was something we used just the other day. I mean, you know,
cool.
There are things happening. We just don't, you know, because he's a good general, he doesn't tell you what he's going to do.
Steve Miller uses that phrase, the fourth branch of government. Really, that's the fifth column, and that's what he addressed first. He went straight to the CIA and said, we got to get rid of these columns. And so saying that it's the fourth branch of government is basically what we say, shadow government. It's the deep state is international. It's the globalists. The shadow government is the SES. It's a paramilitary organization of 10,000 people you cannot fire. Obama hired 8,175 of them, I think. Michael can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But basically, they're Obama resistance, and you are not going to get them to change. They are the ones causing all this nonsense. So I hope he simply says the following. And I hope, I do believe that Steve Miller listens to what at least you guys are doing. So I think they need to put forth a new law that says the time for the SES is over. We've integrated completely the supposed senior, what do they call it? SIS, Senior Information Officers is what it was to begin with. And then Intelligence Service, excuse me. And then they changed it to SES, right? So they could put it in all branches because it worked so good taking over the intelligence community in 1979, I think it was. So now what they need to do, create legislation to stop it because it is in every way the antithesis of the civil service, and it is absolutely anti-American, and it's everything that we've said it is in the past. Plus, I do believe, as you pointed out today, they are simply the puppets of the Pilgrims.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, Andrew Yoda Marshall's gone. That world, it's like the last, like in the fall when the leaves turn to color, it's this last brilliant plumage of the globalist oligarchs, right? And we're given the opportunity to see it clearly, and if we can see it clearly, to attempt to realize that individuals are the ones that make things happen. And I think the thing that is most challenging to me is when I speak. As Douglas knows, relentlessly, I've been at this for 40 years, literally. I mean, and talking to people whenever the context would come up, and that's what has to happen. It was just 3% of the people that were involved in the first American Revolution, which we only partially won. And so Christopher Strunk could give us a tremendous amount of detail regarding what was left behind on the table in the American Revolution and the whole involvement of federalism with Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. But mind you, and I agree with Christopher, he says, well, give John Jay a break. I mean, we were up against the wall and he had to do something. See, because at the time we were operating under treaties with Britain after the Revolutionary War, in which the waterways, all the waterways in the United States were under the dominion of Britain still at that time. And it was only gradually that we were able to push back and get dominion over our own waterways. So now who owns like dockyards and stuff like that in the U.S.? China. Yeah, so don't think it's over, and don't go to sleep.
What about Britain? I mean, when you say, Douglas has said this many times, when you say China, you say Britain.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing is they weaponize. They're using the Venetian tactic of weaponizing other nations to struggle with each other, so they don't have to do it themselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just, you know, look at the Crusaders want to hitch a ride from the Venetians to the Crusade, and he said, okay, but if I'm going to do that for you, what you got to do to me is go topple Constantinople. You're right? Oh, okay. So they went and they did that. And so it's always this diversion of human effort, you know. And these people are not creative. They redirect. They steal. They're privateers. They're pirates, basically. And I hate to say
they're masters of propaganda.
I love the British people, but they're very, very clever. And basically, the British Navy was so effective because they gave them lines so that they didn't have their teeth falling out and weren't covered with scabs like the Spanish sailors were a mess. Their health was horrible. And the Brits figured out that just putting lines on the ship would be sufficient to stave back scurvy and having their teeth fall out. And
So John's an old limey.
Hey, Betsy, your mic's off.
Yeah, okay, my mic is off. Sorry, John, I muted you because we've gone for over an hour. Douglas, Michael, can you wrap it up and take where John is talking about in history and bring it forward? People want action items. We want to know what we can do on the ground. I like to see the patriots out there causing a ruckus whenever they can, making sure that when they do something locally, they take a video of it or picture, send it to us, and then we make it scale globally. That way, your small efforts can have a global effect on how we're going to collectively, all of us out here, change the world. Michael, Douglas?
It's time for being nice. That time is over. We need to use the same tactics of Saul Alinsky. We need to use Obama's tactics. We need to use the mob rule tactics of the Democrats. I like what I'm seeing now. People are going to the Democrats' town hall meetings and speaking the truth and asking difficult questions and asking Joe Biden, hey, what about that Ukraine? Did you see what they said today? Oh, Joe got paid $900,000 from Ukraine. Isn't that just dandy? So we have to keep pushing. We have to ask the whistleblowers on our side, the white hats, to come forward. We have to basically say to everyone in every single federal agency, if you don't come forward and speak the truth now, we want you to go down with all the rest of them. So we need to become active. But also, remember, it is consciousness that changes everything. We have underscored the fact that these isms, they're not isms. They're one psychotic person. And then people take their nonsense and they believe it because that's the propaganda. But what do? Oh, they are dictators, totalitarian, ruthless, killing dictators. They don't mind killing millions of people to get their way so that their ism comes into history, basically. That's what most of them do it for. So what we need to do here, we need to start a new ism, and we did. It's called anti-globalism. We started a new ism called nationalism again. We started MAGA-ism, and all these isms are the new archetypes. They are the new icons, the new leitmotifs that we can follow, and that's what we need in a new age. And as we invent these, because they have to be invented like a meme, one single meme. Look at Pepe, the frog. A Democrat looks at Pepe and they practically cry. Why? Because it represents logical freedom, nationalism. It represents Trump. It represents all kinds of things that they don't want to exist. So ignore them. Our job is to go out and vote. Our job is to throw the monkey wrench into the works. Our job is to use the same tactics as the enemy on them.
Yeah, and at some point, we have to deal with the global communication system, which has become a singular item and has no accountability now. And that's why we put forward the Miller Act notice and the proposal to the president related to how the cash is used to actually build a truly free press that's not run by the Pilgrim Society. And when we do that and we diversify and we get competition out there, then I think we can start seeing some sort of normalcy in our communication. But right now, all we see in the mainstream media is propaganda. It's all lies.
Well,
and
I think that
hey, we keep seeing Chris, and he's not saying anything.
Well, I want to get Chris talking about currency because I think that that's the power that President Trump can use most effectively. And
Okay, Chris, can you say something to us so we know you're there? Okay, we're not getting Chris, so we're going to let him go. And John, maybe you could finish the point.
Well, I'll finish what the kind of things that Chris and I got into with Douglas yesterday, and it has to do with Bill Still, who also is involved in this conversation, although he wasn't on the phone. But basically, what we have now. It's not really fiat currency because the basis of the strength of the dollar as we know it is that the Americans actually have an economy that is creating value. And so it's the value of our economy that backs our currency. But what's happened with who's issuing the currency, having the Fed issue the currency when they're not even a part of our government. They just, the head of the Fed is appointed by the president, so people still suffer under the illusion that it's some kind of federal operation, but it's a federal. It's not federal, and they don't have any reserves, right? Well, the Treasury was outlawed against printing money, and the last actual Treasury notes were the $2 bills with Jefferson on them that we had some time ago, if you remember, right? And but President Trump could begin to slowly introduce Treasury notes into the economy, and he could retire our debt at about $500 billion a year, and it would pull us away from the debt service on the interest, which shouldn't be there anyways, because the Federal Reserve is just issuing us and just arbitrarily charging us interest. So there's no point to all of that in the first place. But nonetheless, beyond getting to things like just, grabbing it as odious debt, which actually has a legal basis, but that would destabilize the economy. By gradually introducing actual Treasury notes back into the economy, because what they're doing right now is they're shrinking the money supply. That's how they started the Great Depression. So don't think they're not going to try it again. They're going to take a good third of the money out of the economy, and everybody's like, well, nobody has any money. Well, that's because they shrink the money supply. So President Trump has to be able to put an IV into the economy with actual Treasury notes, but they have to repeal that act that was put not too long ago by Durbin from Michigan. And Chris is back. Maybe he could talk about it if it sounds on now.
Well, John, your point's well taken, and Chris has made sure to verify that what we were saying is true. So what I'm going to say is very simple. The U.S. Federal Reserve was a bunch of British bankers and some bankers who came to America supported by British bankers. And so it goes back to the same place. The bankers were there with Cecil Rhodes, with Alfred Milner, with the press, with the big pharma, with the desire for eugenics and war and killing people so that the elite can have their share of what they take from you. And you can be happy because you're a social democrat. And you believe that the social democrat in their virtue signaling believe in everybody and that they don't want children in cages and that, these are all very, very good things that are part of the lie. Because no socialist ever helped anybody. And they all went into fascism or communism or dictators. So anyone who would believe the socialist lie is simply a product of Tavistock. You're a product of your programming. So John, thank you for joining us today. Chris, thank you for trying to join us today. And Michael, again, your research is amazing. It is as apropos today as it was in 1902. Why don't you close us out with something intelligent instead of what I just said?
I can't. You guys are killing me.
So thank you so much. And all I can say is thank you, Betsy, Tyler, and thank you to the being of Columbia. The true spirit of America is the spirit of wisdom and truth.
Thanks, everybody. We're cutting off now.